Thank you very much. I'm very delighted to be here. Some of you have probably heard me talk before, but if you will bear with me. I'll try and not talk for too long, so there's more opportunity for discussion and questions at the end. From the outset, let me say that I am a very passionate believer that an appalling injustice has been done to Cyprus and to all Cypriots. I don't believe that is just something recent. I think right from my time of knowledge of Cypriot affairs going back into the 50s, the island has been treated in the most appalling way that would not be tolerated in any other society. On the other hand, I'm not a great believer in conspiracy theories. I think that there was a general mindset in the time when I became intimately involved in Cypriot affairs in 1964. There was a general mindset among NATO powers that whatever else happened, the governance of Cyprus must not be left ultimately to the Cypriots. There were a variety of reasons for that, but it was generally accepted. So the injustice came from this general attitude, first of all, of the NATO powers. It came from the manner in which covert and intelligence operations were conducted in the region. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, particularly through the Stay Behind and the GWD and the sheepskin organisations, which meant that extremists within both communities were being armed through NATO and given special training in assassination and disinformation. And it is expressed as well, this injustice, in the degree to which I believe Cypriot history of that period has been subsequently distorted, and people have accepted views of Cypriot history of 63, 64 that were very, very wide of the mark. I think everything that came later, Macmillan Plan in the 50s, the imposed constitution in 60, the Atchison Plan in 1964 and the Annan Plan much later, I mean, all of these were concoctions designed to suit outsiders' interests rather than the interests of the Cypriot people. And I believe very strongly that this was a terrible part of the getting it wrong process, because I think that had there been policies that were genuinely democratic and applied to a Cyprus that could have become a very constructive member of the community of nations of the Eastern Mediterranean, then there would have been huge benefit for every single party concerned. Most of the books about the period, that I have read have been books by academics who inevitably have had to depend on very limited information. Reading Lord Hanna's book, reading other books about Cyprus, I'm struck by the degree to which they have simply excluded a huge part of the genuine history of that 63-64 period, which the Turkish Cypriots very much represent as being the hinge of which Cyprus, as it were, moved into the separated situation that it now finds itself. The problem with academic books is that there is so much that has not been reported, and particularly in factors that are critical in Cyprus, and that, to my mind, also comes back to the activities of the intelligence community there, and the way in which those intelligence communities deliberately distorted the history in order to suit their own objectives. I think the importance of my book is that it scotches a number of myths. It gives people a basis from which to work over the 1964 period. It obviously, for me, gave me a chance to talk to people like yourselves and discuss with you the views that I have of what happened at that time. Just to run quickly through, for those who don't know me, my background. I came from a very ethical family. My father was a leading light in the Church of England, but he was a very independent sort of guy, and he was actually an encourager of liberation theology for South America, and he believed that at times the church was getting involved in resistance activities. But the friends I grew up with and the people I knew, tended to be people who certainly did not say my country right or wrong. They tended to say, that people tended to believe that people had to take wise decisions on the basis of some sort of ethical concept of affairs. Rather by mistake, I joined the Royal Navy at the age of 13. I signed up for 21 years, and quite how I came to do that is, I really don't know, because it wasn't a sort of natural path for me to go, but it led me into some interesting times. And once I went to sea, which was in 1950, I immediately was plunged into the first year of the Korean War and saw a great deal of action there. The Korean War radicalised me quite strongly. There were injustices there, and there were appalling things happening, massacres happening that went unreported in the Western press. The whole reporting of what went on was terribly distorted. I went into Korea in a British aircraft carrier, had 20 planes on board. We came out with one serviceable plane. Not a single one had been shot down or damaged by the enemy. They'd all been shot down or damaged by the Americans. It was just the way the war was at that time. Following that time, I became a pilot. I did frontline service. And then in 1963, I received an appointment as an intelligence analyst on the staff of Commander-in-Chief Mediterranean and on the NATO staff of Command South-East. This has given a lot of people the ability to think that I'm a spook or that I have some nefarious connection with the intelligence services. In fact, it was not so at all. I was a simple serving officer who was given the job of writing a weekly analysis of Mediterranean-related affairs. What it did give me was the chance to read all of the secret reporting from the CIA, from British intelligence, from diplomatic missions and embassies around the Eastern Mediterranean. And immediately I was back into a situation because, not of course Cyprus went at that time, but as far as Greece went, I had family in Greece. I had a quite close relationship with the old Kostas Christopoulos, who was foreign minister, and I knew a lot of the leading figures there. And suddenly I was sitting in Malta reading information coming out of these various agencies, which were so extraordinarily biased that it was of course impossible to believe. And so I began to write reports that I think were more accurate, which went in under the Commander-in-Chief's name. And we'll come on to how that reflected later in terms of Cypriot affairs. At Christmas 1963, I was in Athens on holiday and learned of what was happening in Cyprus, partly through a very good friend, Kostas Kalligas, who was leading reporter for Kathimerini, and who had spent several days interviewing Makarios in depth. And the one thing that struck me of what he said was the degree to which Makarios was totally convinced that the British government was behind the changes that he'd asked for in the Constitution, and that Arthur Clarke had in every single way supported him and promoted the idea that those changes were vital, and had given Makarios to understand that he would be able to negotiate with Dr. Kuchuk some suitable outcome resolution. So suddenly from Athens I was told to get in the plane and go to fly to Cyprus and join the staff of General Young.